Good morning, Todd.
Hey,
It's
how
morning
are
from
you?
my side. Is it morning from your side?
It is not. It is evening here.
Right. And you guys have just had a massive storm come through in Texas. Wow. Awesome. Love those Texas storms, man.
Yeah,
Um,
great.
yeah. So hey, I think Todd needs no introduction to this show. I mean, most of our listeners listen to Glory Cloud as well. I think I might even just go ahead and say all of our listeners do. I think there's almost a complete overlap there.
Okay.
So they know who you are. I don't even have to introduce you, but if you are tuning into this podcast and checking us out on YouTube kind of randomly, then you also do need to go check out Glory Cloud podcast, and that's where Todd Bordow is the co-host with Chris Kai, who's also on the show quite a few times. So go check that out and have a look, and then come back here and what we're doing today, which I'm thrilled about, is just getting to find out a little bit more about Todd. So the whole thing is really kind of an introduction in that sense, and we've heard a lot from him. Really appreciated his insights. Have you been on the Glory Cloud for about a year or two now already? Maybe a little bit over the year.
Almost 2 years, actually.
Yeah, totally. So it's been a lot, and just it's amazing. You just the weeks roll by, and it's just the material you guys get through, and just these insights that's so helpful along the way. So I was just thrilled at the opportunity of being able to chat a little bit more to you, and finding a little bit more about you. So in that vein, let's just jump right in. I mean, would you mind just giving us a little kind of tour of your life, a little story? I mean, maybe we could start with how you became a Christian, or did you come up in a Christian household, or did you become a Christian at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm Jewish. I don't know if you knew that, but
Oh, I didn't. Wow. Yeah. Oh, actually, I did. I totally remember hearing that, and then I forgot it again.
it's
That
okay.
is so interesting. Wow. Was
It may
Klein
have
also?
come out on. Go
Sorry.
ahead.
Yeah. Was Klein also Jewish at some point?
No,
Okay. So I thought maybe you guys had this like crazy connection on the Jewish front, and I was like, that's crazy. Do you speak Hebrew?
uh, no. I studied Hebrew as a child. Modern Hebrew,
Yeah.
because it's typical in the Jewish culture that you go to Hebrew school in the afternoon once a week.
Oh no way.
But
It's
it was
cool.
mostly preparing for bar mitzvah, and it's written. You don't really know what you're saying
Right.
as much.
Right. Okay.
It's just learning to pronounce the
Yeah.
words.
Okay. So it's not like your mom speaking to you in like Hebrew.
No, 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 not like
that
that at all.
that would be pretty cool, right? That would be amazing if you go to seminary and you've already nailed Hebrew.
That would be
So
awesome. But you forget a lot from the time you're 9.
yeah. But at least there's a little bit of familiarity, right, with the I don't know, the Hebrew script at least, or something, because it's all quite strange when you go into it for the first time. Otherwise,
Yeah, when I took Hebrew in seminary, certainly it looked familiar,
right? Yeah.
but it had been so long. It was like almost starting over.
Do you have any people in your family that actually speak Hebrew, or anyone that you could have talked
No,
to at that point?
we were not. Most Jews in America are not religious. It's
Right.
really more a cultural thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So we grew up going to synagogue on Saturdays, but only because that's what we did, not because we believed.
Yeah.
I would say we generally atheistic Jews, though we wouldn't call ourselves atheists.
Wow. Crazy.
So by the
Yeah.
time I was a teenager, I was a fairly idealistic child, and so when I saw my rabbi stone cold drunk at certain events,
No way.
yeah, it kind of made me wonder about religion at all. So
Right. Wow.
I wasn't religious as in any way, didn't believe anything, and it wasn't until I was 17. I was your typical. Of course, this is the 70s,
Okay.
and the 70s in America, and we all partied and smoked pot and
Right. Right.
um, just what you can think of when you watch those movies. That was us.
Right.
And so when I was a senior in high school, my best friend in Phoenix, Arizona,
Hmm.
his parents led Campus Crusade for Christ high school ministry in the city. But my friend and I, we always partied together and smoked together.
Hmm.
But the camp was having a 7-day spring break retreat up at a camp in the mountains. And so they invited me to go. And my friend said, look, it's a bunch of religious weirdos, but we can bring up our pot and just go up in the mountains and get high and
Yeah.
hang out. So I said, sure.
Yeah.
And so in the bus on the way up to the camp, it's the first time I've ever seen or met Christians. And it really hit me how much joy they had. To see happy, joyous teenagers was really odd.
Right. Right.
Especially not on anything.
Yeah.
So that intrigued me to the point of being interested.
Okay.
And during that camp, I started reading the New Testament for the first time on my own. They gave me a Bible. And really it was just something I was thinking about for a few months. And then there was another Campus Crusade camp in Estes Park, Colorado in June of 1980. And I went up to that camp. And by the way, it was interesting that one of the chief song leader and singer at that time was a girl just going into the music industry. Her name was Amy Grant.
Wow.
And so she was our
way.
singer song leader for that week. But of course, I had never heard of her. No one had heard of her.
Right. Amazing.
So, and her songs were simple, but they did sort of minister to me to think about spiritual things.
Yeah.
But it was really the evening speaker. He preached a series on what happened on the cross. Really what happened the last week of Christ's life. It ended with the last night was, what did Jesus do on the cross? What was going on? And that so moved me that I'm pretty sure at that moment I was converted.
Right.
And, I believed in Christ and wanted him to have my whole heart. And so from that point on, and that was the very last, and that was actually the last night I had ever smoked marijuana. I actually was smoking at the camp, and I threw what's called a dime bag. Some of your listeners will know, others will not.
Yeah.
I threw that down the toilet after that night.
Right.
But so it wasn't long before things were obviously difficult at home.
Yeah, I was about to ask. Yeah, that's crazy.
After the first weeks, I was invited to church, and I had to sneak out. And I would sneak out on Sunday mornings, go to church, and very generally say I was with friends, which is true in the general
So is
sense,
that just because it's like a cultural thing for them, pretty much? They're just like, you're Jewish, so even though you're not really going to, I don't know, synagogue or whatever, you shouldn't go to church.
Yeah, in Judaism, it's not the religious part of it, it's the Christian part of it. In other words, if I was a Jew playing around with Buddhism or something else,
yeah,
that would be looked upon as fine.
Wow.
But Christianity is considered a betrayal of the way they raised us, the betrayal of my family. It's looked upon very different than any other religion. And of course, if you would be an atheist, you'd be fine. Nobody would care.
Amazing.
But believing in Jesus was, of course, the biggie.
Yeah. All right. So you're sneaking out. Yeah.
So I'm sneaking out, going to church, and then eventually got convicted. I needed to tell my parents. So I sat down with my parents and explained what happened and what the gospel is. And they were very upset, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Wow.
So there was sort of a detachment at that point. I was estranged. I had to move out.
Wow.
And when I moved out, I had started going to a community college. I was going to be a tennis instructor because that's what I was a pretty good tennis player in high school. I thought, well, maybe that's what I'll do. I didn't know what else I wanted to do. So I moved out and I was working actually 3 jobs and going to school full time, 3 part-time jobs at Phoenix Community College. But during that time, I got involved in the youth group at the local church I was at, which is a really large Bible church in Phoenix. And I became a youth leader. And every once in a while, it would be my turn of all the youth leaders to teach.
Right.
When I would teach, when I was done, the adults in the room, you have a lot of parents involved, would come up and say, you need to go in the ministry. You're a teacher. Which was really odd because I had never taught anything in my life. I'd never been up front. I was very quiet and shy.
Interesting.
And so that made me think about going into the ministry as a new Christian even. And then I heard a presentation on missionary work overseas, and I was one of those guys that walked forward. I want to be a missionary.
Right.
So there was a local Bible college, dispensational, but very, not extreme in any sense. Not even sort of in mid-Calvinist Arminian, right in the middle.
Right. Right.
Most of them had come from Dallas Theological Seminary.
Okay.
And that was the only option to be trained for the ministry. And so problem is I didn't have enough money. And back then you didn't get student loans.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
We didn't even think like that. You pay for it or you don't go.
And seminary hasn't been cheap, right? Well, it isn't cheap now. I don't know if it was different back then.
Yeah, I'll tell you that. But at the time, I was praying, and then I don't know if this was right, but I felt like I needed to get my parents' blessing. I would go over there once in a while. It was tense, but I would still try to see them.
Okay.
But going into the ministry would have been just devastating for them as parents.
Yeah, that's
Because it's
next
one
level.
thing.
Yeah.
Because that's next level. Because I think they were thinking this may be a phase. They'll wait it out.
Yeah.
But once you dedicate yourself to becoming a pastor, then it's life. So,
Wow.
I actually prayed to the Lord that in some weird way, may I get their blessing.
Mm-hmm.
So I went over and told them my plans to go to this Bible college if I could find the money. And they were very upset, a lot of tears. But at the end, my father said something like, well, it's your life, whatever you want to do.
Wow.
And I took that as, okay, that's my blessing.
Yeah, wow.
But I didn't have the money. And in a very strange way, the Lord provided. And that is, about a few weeks before school started, I was hit by a drunk driver. And it totaled my car, but I wasn't hurt. And the settlement came out, and that settlement paid for my whole first semester of school.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a mysterious providence right there. Amazing.
Yes, those don't happen too often, but this time it did.
Yeah. Excellent.
And so I ended up going to Bible college. That's where I met my wife, Cheryl. Cheryl had moved up from Mexico. She was a missionary kid that grew up in Mexico.
Okay, cool.
And she had come to take some classes at the school. So at that point, I worked in the afternoons and actually paid for school. God provided enough through my job to get through it without any debt, which was wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then at that point oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, I missed the seminary there. Was that Dallas that you went to? Or
No, this is a Bible college. I'm sorry.
Bible college, right. Sorry. Yeah, got it.
This was a school called Arizona College of the Bible. It no longer exists. But
okay, cool.
So I went to Bible college, graduated. Then I was called to be a youth pastor in a Baptist church in Central California, a small farming community there.
All right.
So Sharon and I went there, and I was there 3 years. It was a wonderful experience. They were great to us, and it's fun because when you're in a small farming town, it was like 12,000 people. Mm-hmm. When you do a youth event, it is the event in town.
Oh, wow. Classic. Yeah.
So there's nothing else. So we had the largest youth group and the largest events.
Amazing.
In town. But towards the third year, I really got a sense that I wanted to study the word more. I didn't feel like I really knew it as far as what it contained, but I couldn't put it together.
Right.
I really didn't have a theology. I just had Bible knowledge. And the desire to go to seminary was really strong. And it was rough for us because the people loved us. We had a great life there. Youth group was growing, but I couldn't sleep almost with this desire to go to seminary. So that made me unhappy because I felt guilty for wanting to leave, but I really wanted to go to school. So I finally told the senior pastor, I said, this desire won't go away. I've been praying about it for a year. And he said, that sounds like it's of the Lord. You should just follow it. And so I did what I wouldn't recommend nowadays, but you're young and your faith may lack some basic wisdom, but I simply resigned without having a position or a job or anything.
Right. So
I mean,
I'm just muting my mic, Todd. We've got this guy working on our kitchen and he's drilling through something right now. So if I'm laughing and not making any sounds, that's why. But I'm with you,
okay.
man. And that's so funny that you did that, though. I love it.
I'm glad you told me that because you looked really creepy the way that looked. So
He's nearly done. I just got to get through this last. I don't know if you can hear that. It's like a zzz coming
I
through
cannot
there.
hear it now.
Okay, excellent. Well, maybe I'll leave it on then. It should be fine. But yeah, wow. So you just bolted. You just without any safety net, so to speak.
Yeah, what happened was, and this is what how the Lord brought me to Reformed theology. I was going to move back to Phoenix because I had a lot of connections there, and I knew I could get work. I grew up there. But at the last minute, Cheryl's parents had moved to Escondido, and they had started a Hispanic church.
Hmm.
And so he found out that there was a church in Temecula looking for a youth pastor.
Hmm.
And I was going to move back to Phoenix because they were planting an extension of Western Conservative Baptist Seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, I'll go there from my seminary and work and pay for it.
So so are you kind of Baptistic in your leanings at this point? Is this
No,
no? All right. So it
just
was
back
just
then I was.
no, I mean, sorry, back then is what I'm talking about. Was there
Oh
a
yes,
a later evolution into kind of a Presbyterian understanding?
yeah. I mean, I was already coming out of dispensationalism. I was reading things like George Ladd,
Yes.
and George Ladd was not, reformed, but he
No.
questioned dispensationalism. He
Yeah.
didn't, and so I was really appreciating that. So I knew what I wasn't. I just didn't know what I was at that point.
Right. Right. Totally. Got it.
I knew I didn't fit that system.
Mm-hmm.
So but what ended up happening, it's one of these providences, is we were already packing up, and my wife's father called me and said, there's a church about half an hour from Westminster Seminary in Escondido that's looking for a youth pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, I'll send a resume. So I sent a resume down. It's a large church. I mean, they were
Wow.
one of the premium churches in the area. And so
Wow.
size-wise, so I didn't think we had a shot. No one knew Cheryl or me. So they asked us to come down for an interview pretty quickly, which surprised us. We drove down to Southern California, to that area, and they interviewed me. And the next couple days, they offered me the position.
Wow.
We
No
were
way.
just in shock, totally unexpected. We already had most things packed up. So we
Mm-hmm.
ended up moving to there, and I told them I want to start at least part-time school while
Yeah.
I'm a youth pastor. They said if it's part-time, no problem.
And you've got like Westminster right down the road,
And that
which is
was,
pretty.
yeah, it was a 25-minute drive to Westminster. So
Wow.
that's where Klein comes in.
Yeah. Wow. So did
'Cause my
you two questions, but before you move on there, were you already married at that point?
Yeah, her and I were married, and by that time we had our first child. We have 5 children, but that's when we had our first child.
Okay,
In
cool. So things were already moving there. And then had you even heard of Westminster Seminary? Was that like on
I
your radar?
I looked it up on the. I think we had
No.
internet then. I looked it up. Yeah, I think there was internet, but I looked it up and found out it was solid. I didn't know
Wow.
what reform was, but I knew it was conservative, and they believed the Bible. So I thought, okay.
That's what I call a providence right there. I mean, that is amazing. And people agonizing over which seminary to go to, and and the whole thing. And yeah, you're at the seminary. It's amazing. That's awesome.
I
I think
guess.
if I'm not mistaken, I think I was listening to either Klein's son or grandson talk about this, but he was just saying something similar happened with Klein, right? Where he was about to go to Dallas or something. I can't remember the details now, but just by some amazing twist of events, he ended up in Westminster rather than some completely different scenario. So you just can't help but marvel at those things sometimes.
I need to hear that story. I had never heard
Yeah,
that before.
I think it was. I'll track it down and I'll flick it to you. But yeah, I think it was by his grandson, that interview. But anyways, we'll come back to that. But on your so you don't know about, you basically think it's a solid conservative seminary. Oh boy. And tell me about your first impressions. Like, did it rock your world, or did it kind of just you ease into it,
My
or?
first class was Kingdom Prologue,
Oh
and I
wow.
went in, and there's Meredith Klein on his board explaining things, and
Surrounded by the
I'm just
glory
sitting
cloud.
there. It was glorious. It's the closest thing to a second conversion you can imagine, because the whole Bible was coming together for me.
Wow.
And people struggle with climb, but I was just in a place where it all made sense right away.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can
I
imagine.
was just there and ready, and then I
So you're
took
not
a
coming
couple
in
other
with the
classes.
reformed baggage so much. It's not like, because I think people struggle with Klein when they come in. It seems to me anyway, when they're coming in from I don't know, perhaps they've come up in a reformed church and they've had a certain kind of reformed theology, the whole way through, and then they get Klein, and then they're like, but it seems like, if you come in fresh or come in from the other angle, even from a more dispensational background, it just provides quite a, it just clicks. It seems. I don't know.
I think that's
There's
right,
some, yeah. All right. So you're
because
having the sick.
you don't have to unlearn anything in a sense.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, absolutely. So, and so it actually clicked for you the first time you were under his ministry, as it were, or under his teaching there.
Yes, and when he came to Genesis 17, he convinced me of infant baptism
Okay,
pretty
that's when it happened.
quickly.
That fateful
That's when it
moment.
happened. So,
Yeah.
so I came home and tried to explain it to my wife, and
Oh
that
boy.
took a good while. I mean, she was not there. I mean, it was hard for her because she grew up Baptist theology, and
Okay.
to think that her father could be wrong, that's tough when you have a lot of respect for your
Totally.
father.
Totally. Then you just got to go up. But don't you understand, honey? It's about the glory cloud, and the glory
And
cloud.
let
And
me let me draw you what Klein's drawing you on the board here.
yeah, like that's
What
gonna
is
help
that?
anyone. Just with the
Right.
big train smash on the board. Yeah, totally. Oh man, funny.
Exactly.
Well, I've had a similar experience where I've tried to explain at least Klein's rationale, which I thought was revolutionary on the infant baptism thing. And I'm trying to explain it to my wife, and she was just not buying it, and I was just doing an absolute wreck of a job. It sent me back to the drawing board. I don't know if it sort of exposes this. You thought you understood, but you actually didn't, and then you have to go back and you come
Yes.
back. It's kind of my litmus test. I know that if I can properly explain it to my wife, I know that I've actually got it myself. So I don't know if it's the same for you.
Yeah, it's one thing to say you understand it, but then when you have to explain it to someone else,
Yeah,
it's a
without
whole
the
nother thing.
terminology, you can't use the theological terminology, and you can't use you got to actually say what you mean.
And
So,
and again, a lot of it is emotional. It's for all of us. It's having to admit that things we were taught were wrong,
yeah, yeah,
without denigrating the person. That you can be a godly person and just get things wrong. We all do.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you go through that process. But when she wasn't sure, I would say, "Is it okay if we baptize the kids? And if you trust me that it's not at this point, could you trust me as long
Amen.
as it's
Yeah.
not against your conscience? If you're still," she said, "Yeah, I trust you." And so we baptized the kids, and eventually, there was, I don't know what we were listening to or what I was explaining, but it just clicked for her, and
Okay.
then it was all there. From that point on,
Oh,
she was there. So
and you're at a Baptist church at that point, or was that a?
it was a broad evangelical church, and that was the problem,
Okay.
because we thought, okay, I now have a place where I can go to school for, well, as long as I'm here, and we'll have a job. We can pay for school. Again, we didn't think student loans in those days.
Right. Right.
We
Right.
thought you pay for school.
Yeah.
So I was able to pay for part-time what I needed.
Hmm.
But there were two problems. One, you realize as you looked at the amount of classes you'll need, if I keep going part-time, I'm going to be in school 20 years.
Oh man. Wow.
You know,
Yeah. Totally.
so eventually I'm going to have to go full-time.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was happening is once you learn Reformed theology, you're going to a broad evangelical church and you're the youth
Yeah.
pastor.
Oh
You
man.
start seeing all the things you don't like
Yeah.
that are wrong.
It's a difficult situation. Totally.
It was tough. And matter of fact, the second year, things were getting bad because the things I was watching in worship and hearing from the pulpit were bothering me more and more. And I was on the staff, and I didn't want to leave. We just got there, not even
Yeah.
2 years.
Oh man.
But so the final straw came where it was a Mother's Day. And the pastor got up and he was going to preach. And then his wife came up, sort of in a joking way, pushed him out of the way and said, "It's Mother's Day, it's my turn." And then I won't even say preached, she taught on raising kids. I mean, there's no gospel, nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
So everything you could imagine wrong. And I turned to my wife and I said, we're done.
We're done.
I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so the staff met every week, usually on Tuesday morning. We met at a local restaurant. And that's the pastor, the few other pastors, worship leaders. And typically, and you know how broad evangelicalism, and I don't want to denigrate all of it, but if people liked it, you thought it was good.
Right. Exactly.
If
Yeah.
you got a
Yeah.
if you got a really good response, you're happy.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
And I'm not an in-your-face type guy. I wasn't always raising objections. I'm pretty quiet. But so at the meeting, they were praising the Sunday morning, the Mother's Day, all the positive response they gotten, how large the crowd was.
Right.
And I finally said, I had to say something before resigning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, shouldn't we at least think about whether that was proper according to the Word of God?
Mm. Mm.
And it was really quiet, and you could see how angry they were for me to suggest or even say that.
Mm.
I mean, it was anger on their faces.
Yeah. Wow.
And they didn't really answer. They kind of thought who are you to be so judgmental? And
Yeah.
the Spirit was there, obviously. How do you question the Spirit?
Right. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I think that afternoon I went into the pastor's office. I said, I need to resign.
Wow.
And so that really threw us because now school's over.
Man.
And I just started, 2 years part-time. By the way,
Oh.
that's where I met Lee and Misty.
Oh, really?
I was
Wow.
I was in class, mostly more Misty than Lee, but I was in class with them at different times.
So, okay. So they were in class with you. Wow. I didn't realize that. Okay, good. So you actually got to know Lee as a student with him at seminary.
Yeah, we actually went to the same church together for a while.
Okay. So now you met Lee and you're thinking, what are you going to do at this point? How is that going to work out for you?
Yeah, so what we decided to do is, and we were very sad about it, but we moved back to Phoenix because, again, I had a lot of contacts and I could get jobs. And we would just work for a while and just figure out a plan B, what we're going to do. We had 2 kids at that time.
Wow. That's
So
crazy.
we moved back to Phoenix and got an apartment in a very sketchy part of town because that's all we could afford.
Right.
And again, I got a number of jobs. I was working a lot of hours. And my wife was a waitress, and we worked out our hours. So one of us would be home with the kids.
Yeah, I was about to ask. Like, I know my wife would want to know that. How did
Yes.
you do that? How did I mean, just seminary and kids on its own is a thing. Let alone working jobs and from both of your sides. So that's amazing.
Yeah. So there was obviously no seminary that year, and I just tried to make some money and share a waitress at a Mexican restaurant and made some tip money for us. But towards the end of the year, it was just really difficult because I wanted to go to seminary so bad. And
Yeah.
so then that was the time you started thinking about student loans.
Okay.
So I thought,
Right.
what, let's bite the bullet. Let's
Yeah.
get a student loan. We got to move back to Escondido. I got to go to seminary. It's
Yeah. You
driving
weren't
me nuts.
thinking drunk drivers at that point? I'd be like
Yeah,
roaming around the street.
I
Just
should have went downtown and kind of looked
yeah.
around for the drunk.
Totally. Man, the
But
temptation would have been there to say the least. But anyway. All right. So you went student
never
loan.
crossed my mind until you said it right there. So what happened was, and this is another neat providence, is we moved to San Diego after a year. Just again, it was a step of faith, but we got the loan.
Okay.
Now, it seemed like a lot back then, but in today's day, that was nothing. That was a
Right.
pretty small loan.
Okay. Wow. Because
It's
it's
like
a decent chunk today. I mean, I'm always like, whenever I hear those numbers, I'm like,
oh,
wow,
I
that
know.
is just unbelievable. I mean, I can't even fathom it. Maybe it's the conversion rate or something, but I'm just like, unbelievable.
I can't fathom it either.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Right.
amazing what they have to pay.
Yeah. I mean, in New Zealand, because, South Africa was a little bit like that. If you went to a really good university, you'd have to just cough out like a whole mortgage kind of thing. In New Zealand, we get so soft with this stuff because it's kind of like all your decent universities, you can get like student interest-free loans from the government, and it's just very cruisy and it's very well priced, and and then every now and again you just get a blast from what's going on in the States, and it's just frightening. So yeah, I mean, for ministry students, we've had a couple of people come think about coming to New Zealand from either Westminster Seminary or one of the big seminaries, and and every time it's become a problem that they've got all the student loan debt they got to pay, and they, you know, it's a downgrade on the currency, you know, and still pay that debt is going to be too much of a problem for them, and it ends up being something that keeps them from coming. So it riles me up a little bit. I wish there was another way.
Yeah, there should be.
Mm, yeah.
So what happened was, again, and I wouldn't recommend this, but it was one of those things where enough people had told us to go in the ministry, told me, we started the process, let's finish it any way we can. So we moved back, we moved to San Diego, and Cheryl, my wife's sister, lived there. We lived with them for a couple of weeks, and I was job hunting in Escondido near the
Hmm.
seminary. And I found a job, a graveyard shift job at a brain injury rehab center. And then Cheryl got a job again, waitressing. And those who are from Escondido will know it was the Lawrence Welk Resort.
Okay.
So she was a waitress at the dinner theater, pretty good tips on certain nights.
Yeah.
And so we were still really poor because our money was all going to school. And so, and then rent. But, you know, this is amazing now. But back then, we got a condo in Escondido for $500 a month, 2-bedroom, 2-story condo for the 4 of us.
Wow.
And in the 6 years we were there, she never raised the rent once.
No way. That's amazing. Yeah.
So can you imagine Southern Cal now, $500 a month for a condo?
Yeah. That's insane. Totally. I mean, I'm not totally in touch with the prices there, but I can imagine. You know,
Yeah.
just for the few times I've been, I imagine it's a lot more than that. So yeah. Wow. Good job.
So what happened was back then one of the students even had a food pantry for the students, and we would go there for a lot of our groceries. And it was those were the days where you had cash in your hand, and by the end of the week, if your cash was done, that's what you spent.
Right. Right.
And so even though we were poor in the American sense, not in the other countries,
Yeah.
you know, we were happy, we were learning. We the Lord provided just enough.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually the loan paid for school, which only took me maybe 4 years to pay back because, like I said, in today's standards, it was pretty
Yeah.
small.
Yeah. Wow.
But it was really rough for me to do that. Maybe that's the Jewish in me. I did not want to
Right.
take out a loan and pay other people
Well,
for my
wisdom
loan.
in that for sure. As I was saying, you know, just kind of, you know, I've seen people quite crippled by it at the end. It almost seems like a self-defeating thing sometimes. Yeah, I suppose it works if you're like going to go into like this very well-paying pastorate somewhere. You know, when does that happen ever? I suppose it does happen for some people, but I mean, in terms of like heading over to some third world context and being a missionary, or, you know, it's not going to happen. You know, you're not going to get a lot of money. You know, it's the wrong career path for that. So it doesn't seem like the same kind of, you know, sense, I suppose. Like when if you're going into something that's, you know, getting this marketable degree, or going into academia, or you're wanting to, you know, get your money back, essentially, it kind of makes sense to take out that massive loan. But yeah, I don't know, it's difficult. It's a difficult thing, but well done for getting through it without that massive thing over your head.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
is funny you say that because I just remember thinking, this debt is massive for, for those times.
Right. Cool. So and then you got through seminary. You're like super duper Kleinian at that point. Did you connect with Meredith Klein himself? Did you become quite good friends with him?
I mean, as a student, you know, I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I had him for the classes he taught. I mean, I had him for the different classes, but I did end up flying out with a group of guys to see him in Massachusetts later.
Well.
But I don't know if he'd remember my name before he died or not. But
Right. Right. Yeah.
he'd remember my face for sure.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's amazing. What an experience. I mean, obviously we've heard a little bit about that with you and Chris, and you guys all talk about it. And so, you know, I think that's kind of the
Yeah.
one area that we feel we're able to connect with you guys on. It's just, you're like the, it's the what is that whole thing where you kind of, if I know you, then I'm only 1 degree away from Klein, or 2 degrees away
Yeah,
from Klein.
6 degrees.
One of those things. You're the closest thing we've got to Klein in that sense. But yeah, I mean, so what I'm thinking about hearing you talk though is that you did seminary again. You got your demon after that. So you went back for more pain after the pain.
I did. A few years later, I had become a church planner for the Orthodox Presbyterian Church after graduation.
Yeah.
So I planted 3 churches, and in my 3rd church, I did want to go get a DMin, wanted to write a dissertation. So actually, my 3rd church helped me out a bit, but I was able to do that all with just paying for it, no more debt, which was nice. But I ended up writing on divorce,
Yeah.
my dissertation that we talked about on Glory Cloud.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was at RTS in Orlando.
So just to reverse a little bit there, I mean, so have you went out as a church planter? How, obviously that's interesting to me, just being in the church planting world, but what does that look like with, what's the process there? You got out of seminary, you were at a Presbyterian church, and they just, how, did they just kind of select people, or do you apply, or how does that work?
Yeah, you either can apply to a particular church or you can send it into like the OPC or the home missions of a presbytery
Okay.
and let them know you're available. I was open. I was licensed in the PCA
Okay.
in Southern California, so I was sending resumes to both OPC and PCA and a few others.
Yeah.
But this particular group, and the way they do it in the OPC is if there's a small, well, at least they used to, if there's a small core group of around 25, 30 people that want to start a church,
Mm-hmm.
they begin meeting under the oversight of home missions. And if it grows
Cool.
enough where they've saved enough to maybe cover half the salary, then the OPC covers the other half for 4
Right.
years.
Okay.
And so when they had grown enough that they were ready to call a pastor, then they called me.
Got it. Okay. So you came
And
into
that was
that
in
point and you're getting a salary
Eastern
and so
Washington,
forth.
right?
Yeah. Okay, cool. And so is that the church that you're currently at, or is that, did you
No,
move
no.
on from that point?
I did that 3 times. I did one in Eastern Washington,
Okay.
but I didn't stay as the pastor. I just organized it and then moved down to Fort Worth, Texas.
Right.
And it was a same situation. But I was there, organized it, which means you train the leaders and then they get ordained, the officers. And then I stayed there as their pastor for another 6 years or so. So I was there 8 years. Then I did that again in New Mexico, in Rio Rancho. Same process, was there
Right.
8 years total.
Yep.
And then I think you knew that I lost my voice. My vocal cords broke down.
No. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're reminding me something I heard on Glory Cloud, but yeah. So tell us about that. Was that from,
Well,
what was that from?
for some reason, I started to lose my voice, and I didn't no one understood. And first, I thought maybe it was something in the air, allergies, because it is high desert. But it
Yeah.
kept getting worse and worse. So I went to the throat doctor, and he didn't know what was going on. Didn't understand it.
Huh.
And so they thought at first allergies, but it just kept getting worse. So finally, they noticed that there were some nodes on my throat, and they thought maybe I had throat cancer,
Wow.
and started maybe from my lungs, because that would explain the nodes. And
Yeah.
often lung cancer goes up into the throat.
Okay.
So I had a CAT scan and waited for that, and thought maybe this was the end,
Wow.
because
Yeah.
there was no other. And my parents were heavy smokers,
Okay.
so they were trying to connect it. Maybe this is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finally, the CAT scan came back, said your lungs are fine. We have no idea. So I
Wow.
went to a third specialist. This is supposed to be the best ears, nose, and throat guy in New
Yeah.
Mexico,
Right.
and he did a lot of looking in there, and he found that the vocal cords had come apart. And he says
Oh.
this is very, very rare for vocal cords just to separate,
Yeah.
and that's why. And he said there's only 2 options. You can get steroid injections every few months for the rest of your life
Right.
to strengthen them,
Yeah.
or you can get surgery to put an implant that forces your vocal cords. Well, I chose the surgery.
Yeah.
And he said after the surgery, within a week or 2, you're going to have your voice full. It's going to be strong.
Yeah.
So he was wrong.
Oh.
So After the surgery, I couldn't speak for a while, but when the voice started coming back, it only lasted a short time. And then it got even worse than it ever had before.
Ah, no way.
So, I mean, I was preaching like this.
Ah, and you have to preach. You know, it's like, wow, of all
So
things. Yeah.
I finally resigned, and I didn't know what the Lord was doing, but I couldn't do this anymore.
Wow.
And so we moved to Austin, where my daughter lived. I got a job there. I'm from New Mexico in Austin.
Hmm.
So I got a full-time job delivering where I wouldn't have to speak,
Right.
seeing if I didn't speak all day, maybe the voice would come back.
Yeah.
My wife got a full-time job. We lived in a 500 square foot little apartment. Uh,
Wow.
by then we were empty nesters. Kids had all moved out.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
So we were just living and wondering, it was a very difficult time for us.
Yeah.
A lot of wondering because of this, my voice didn't come back. I was lifting a lot at my age. It wasn't wise to be lifting as much as I was in
Okay.
delivery, but
Yeah.
that was not going to last.
Right. Okay.
So about 6 months into that, the voice started to come. It's never fully recovered from what it was, but it just started where I could speak. People could hear me again
Man.
normally. And so we were there almost 9 or 10 months. Then the pastor of this church I'm at now in Houston resigned,
Okay.
and it's already in my presbytery. So they asked me to candidate, and then I was called. So
Wow.
I was in Austin a year, then we moved to Houston,
Hmm.
and now I've been here 2 years in Houston.
Wow. What a story. That's amazing. Thank God the voice came back. I mean, do you know why? Or is this kind of all random?
I mean, the only thing I read online was that sometimes these surgeries, there are a lot of scars from it,
Okay.
and they take a year or two for the scars to heal.
Wow.
That may have happened.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyways, you can speak and you're on the glory cloud. So we're
Yes.
happy.
Thank you.
That's a good end to that story. Wow, that's so stressful. That's crazy. Yeah, I often think, I mean, for all things, for a preacher, it's almost like you can lose your hands, you can lose your legs, you
I
can,
know.
you know what I mean? It's like the one thing you can't really lose is your voice there,
Right.
or your
Right.
brain, I suppose. But anyway, those are the two things you really want to hold intact. But yeah,
And I'd like
wow.
to say that, well, during that whole time, my faith was just totally wrong, trusting in the Lord. But no, we really struggled. It wavered.
I can imagine.
It was a difficult time.
Yeah. Wow. Just a difficult. Yeah. Talking about providence earlier, but a difficult providence, right? A mysterious,
Yeah.
difficult providence. Yeah. Um, so I suppose just coming back to your dissertation, I'm quite interested in why you'd want to jump into that sort of work. I find myself in a similar situation after like 15 years of pastoral ministry. I'm now starting PhD stuff, and oldest PhD guy around, and you see all these 21-year-olds getting their PhDs, and like, what the heck? you know and I'm just thinking, what am I doing to myself? What is this? What am I doing? Am I just like a sucker for punishment? And I'm trying to, you can tell I'm still reasoning it through. I'd be interested to hear what your process was, why you decided to jump back in and think about it some more.
As far as the dissertation or the doctorate,
Well, I think a little bit of both, really. Anything that comes to mind.
I think the doctorate was partly I just wanted to learn more,
Right.
and then partly I wanted to, in case as I aged, if I ever wanted to get into teaching,
Yeah.
I wanted to pursue a little bit more, and I didn't want to quit the ministry to get a PhD.
Right. Got it.
So I thought this I could stay in the ministry and do and have that experience.
Yeah.
The dissertation actually was not my plan because I had preached through Matthew, and when I preached through the Sermon on the Mount, especially the antithesis in, well, all of them in Matthew 5, I really felt like the majority of Reformed and conservative scholars were missing the redemptive historical point of Matthew 5.
Yeah.
I wasn't the only one, but certainly a minority of how I viewed it. And so I wanted to write on that.
Yeah.
So it was just going to be a theological dissertation on how to understand the antitheses of Matthew 5.
Right.
But then when I met with the dissertation committee, they said, in our school, you write to solve a problem,
All right.
a practical problem.
Right.
So I thought, okay,
It's
I'm
the
going to have
worst.
to narrow this down.
Right. Right.
So because I had experience over the years dealing with abusive marriages and
Mm,
divorces, I thought, okay, I'll deal with that particular antithesis
mm-hmm.
of what Jesus is saying on divorce. And so I brought out the redemptive historical aspect and how it then affected the understanding
Mm-hmm.
of the divorce exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
That's because of what they required that's why I narrowed it down to divorce.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Has it served you well, that study? I mean, just moving forward from that. I mean, obviously you've served everyone else with that. And I know the PDF is available on your website, which I
Yes.
haven't mentioned. What is your blog called again? With the K.
Kingdomcompilations.com.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kingdom Compilations with the K. But if you Google that, you'll definitely you'll get it. And I know it's a
Not
PDF.
everybody will get to kingdom, but I think most do.
Right. So you have divorce there. That's been a big thing. And I noticed also sort of it seems like counseling and, you know, maybe the abuse thing, patriarchalism, and then the two kingdoms thing have been kind of big themes in things that you've dealt with. Would that be more or less correct?
Yeah, those have been certainly interests of mine. And so, yeah.
Totally. It's a great blog and people should check it out. It's just very helpful. Obviously, I'm a big Two Kingdom fan and just kind of moving in that direction, thinking about it. But I found your stuff very helpful. You know, again, just that pastoral angle coming through and, you know, just making it real at some level. You know, I think a lot of it happens at quite a cerebral sort of, I don't know, state and just to have someone on the ground in ministry talk about it in its you know, thinking about its benefits and you know within a Kleinian framework and just I don't know I find that very helpful and just sometimes very sane, you know, in a world of craziness sometimes as I read through that stuff. But on that point, maybe just to round this up and make this somewhat a listenable length for people tuning in. The You know, I was just keen to get, I suppose, two things more out of you, and that is, firstly, if you had to like, we've just talked about your journey, and you know, obviously, we're just touching the surface. So I know there's a million more things to say on every one of those points, but as you think about, like, what would you go back and tell yourself if you could somehow miraculously you know teleport yourself back to yourself when you were beginning the journey obviously I'm thinking about those who are beginning the journey now, what would you say to yourself to kind of any words of warning or caution or encouragement that come to mind there um, that you can think of?
Boy, no one's ever asked me that before.
Yeah.
I think I would warn myself that really believing in the sovereignty and love of God takes a long time.
Yeah.
Theologically, you know it, but you have to experience a lot of suffering, difficulties, challenges, and we still struggle with that, of course.
Mm.
My wife is always the stable one. I'm usually the one emotionally less stable with life, but yeah, just comforting my young self that God is working all these things out,
Right.
whether we understand why or not. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I would tell myself now from experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. And I think probably that's exactly what people need a year going into it, because I think, you know, the whole thing is you think you're going to get, you know, I don't think I've finished my journey, hopefully. And, you know, hopefully there's more to go. But even now, just if I could just go back 5 years, I think I'd have a lot to tell myself in terms of just, yeah, it's kind of like you want to sort it out more quickly, you know,
Yeah.
whether it's this situation or that situation. It's just, no, sorry, it's going to take a long time. Who did someone said this the other day and I thought, wow, this is amazing. I love this. You know, I know it doesn't work like this all the time for everyone, but you know, I think he was talking about Moses or something, and he said like the first 20 years for Moses, you know, he thought he was somebody, and then the second 20 years he was thought, you know, realized he was nobody, and then the rest of his life was what God could do with a nobody. Or something along those lines. I probably got the timeline completely wrong there, but I love that idea. That's super. That resonates with me 100%. In terms of just at least the way I can see things going. You just kind of, it's like all the process just to bring you to the ground essentially, and then just trusting God and see what He would do with you. So appreciate
Really,
that.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, go for it. All yours.
Well, just what you said, that I would also remind myself, and you learn this as you get older, is that how powerless you are.
Right. Yeah.
When you're young and in the ministry, you think either your preaching abilities, your counseling abilities, and
Yeah. Yeah.
over time you see the Holy Spirit either opens the heart to the gospel or
Oh man.
closes it. You and yourself are powerless and don't take responsibility for other people's sins and
Yes.
either their belief or disbelief, because
Mm,
the Lord was going to do it anyways. He could have used anything or anyone. So,
right. Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't, and I love the way that comes out in a lot of what you guys talk about on Glory Cloud as well. You're always making these comments that I think are very freeing, and I didn't. If I think back on when I started, I would have ignored all of that. And I suffered for it. Because you're taking on way too much. You are almost guaranteed to burn out. It's just, and it's not even going to be fruitful. It's just a total mess. Whereas, it's the opposite of just trusting in the Lord. I think one of the things that happened for us is when we were going through a particularly difficult time. I came into ministry thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to change the world. This is going to be amazing. Just wait till the world sees me. It's going to be next level. And there I am preaching, and I'm just confused. Confused as to why it is that things are not like, lights are not going on and revivals aren't happening. I mean, that's how deluded I was. Like, just a frightening thought. But and I remember, I'm still deluded. Don't want to give the impression that I've picked myself, but I remember getting to the point where I was like utterly, I can't actually do this. I can't plant the church. I can't do anything. It's just not going to happen. I can't even get one single person to get out of bed and come to church. I can't do, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just
yes.
absolutely powerless, as you said. And then I remember someone walked into church, and I just had to ask them because I was like, why did you come to church this morning? What's the deal? Because I knew that there was no worldly interest for them in being at this church. And why were they there? And what he said to me was, well, I love Jesus and I want to hear his word. And I remember as he said that, like, there's just no way I could make that happen in anyone's heart. And it just kind of dropped, the penny dropped, like,
Wow.
you just can't get that to happen. It's just never going to happen. So you might as well just take that off of you and actually
Yeah.
just trust in the Lord. And actually you might just have a few more years added to your life in the process, and actually
Yep.
enjoy people a little bit more and so forth. So there's so much
Amen.
there. I think one of the best books I actually ever read on this might be worth just quickly mentioning, if I can quickly bring this up. I don't know if you've ever read this, Todd, but let me see. It's something like Grace on the Brink. Oh, there we go. Clay Werner or Clay Werner. Grace on the Brink, Grace for the Burned Out Pastor. It's so good on this point. It really is. It just kind of takes it all the way. So in case you haven't heard of that, or anyone listening
I'm
to
going to
that,
have to order that one.
oh man, you'll love it. I mean, it's I think it's one of Horton's students that went on to
Oh,
write that, and so it's got all the good stuff in there. And but I love the ways it's just applying it to this very issue. It's great. All right, now on the book thing, and just to wrap this up again, I'm going to ask you an equally difficult question.
okay.
If you're on an island and you're allowed 5 books, what are those 5 books? It's not allowed being your Bible.
Oh,
Your
wow.
Bible's already in your bag. You're not allowed to including that.
Yeah, you put me on the spot, didn't you?
I know,
Well,
and
I can tell you.
the horrible part is you're going to give the wrong books. Everyone knows that, because
Oh,
everyone knows
that's
after
true.
they ask this, "Oh, I should have said this." So everyone knows that. So don't worry about it. Just give us the books.
Well, I could just do 4 out of 5 and say The Hobbit and the 3 Lord of the Rings. Um,
Nice. You wouldn't have space for Klein though. You'd have to, I don't know. You'd
no,
have to make a little room
no,
for
I
King and
think
Prilla.
when I look back at the books that have really made the most impression on me would be Grace and Glory, Voss's sermons,
Okay. Wow. Interesting.
changed my life.
Wow.
Um, I would say Kingdom Prologue,
Mm-hmm.
and is that one because that kind of summarizes everything Klein wrote pretty much.
Yes, yes.
And probably Lord of the Rings from my reading. I read those as a teenager 3 times through, and
Really?
that was my escape from the problems of life, was to escape in Lord of the Rings. So
No
those
ways.
books always mean a lot to me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So does the idea of coming to
Maybe.
New Zealand and going to Hobbiton and all that, does that,
Oh, I
is that a happy
yeah,
thought or?
that's a very happy thought.
All right, because I know a lot of Lord of the Rings fans are kind of weird about it. Like they're like, how dare you make a movie of my favorite book, and and that sort of thing. But it's almost like either they're full on into it and they just like love the movie, or they just hate it. So you're kind of favorable towards the movie?
I am, but I had friends there at our church here that just came back from New Zealand last year and took the tour,
Oh, did
and they
they?
said they said you'll be disappointed in some ways because a lot of it is CGI.
Oh, so
So
bad. Yeah, we live very close to one of the places where it's all just, yeah, you can see it in the movie, and it's a real letdown. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's like you're going in, you're expecting to see all sorts of crazy things, and it's not happening. So, yeah. But I mean, Hobbiton's one of the cool places. They've got the actual little Hobbit village and whatnot, so that's not
I
CGI.
understand that. I understand
Yeah,
it's on some guy's farm that he
yeah,
just,
pretty much. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So that's pretty cool. I think you'd enjoy that. All right, so we got The Hobbit for your reading. How many is that? That's 1, 2, 3. You got 2 left.
Yeah.
Choose wisely.
I really liked it, and I read it a number of times. C.S. Lewis's classic, you know, Christianity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mere
What's
Christianity.
what's it called?
Mere Christianity.
Mere Christianity. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, cool. Yeah, great book. Awesome. All right, cool. So that's 4. You got one more.
Okay. If we do system analogy, probably we'll take Hodge.
Really? Yeah. All right. You
Yeah.
can get 3 volumes in one there. That's good. That's a
I
good
can
way
get
to
3.
cheat.
Yeah.
I like
I,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Hodge's 3 volume. Nice. Yeah, that's great. All right. Interesting. That's a good blend. I like it, Todd. It's not all
Yeah.
it's not all theology. You got a little bit of play in there. And
Yeah. You got to get some fiction.
and you even found a way to cheat the system, because it's kind of like when I use my 1 wish to ask for 3 more wishes. I like
I
it. should have
mostly
gone
have
for
8
like.
books and call it 5.
Exactly. Should have gone for like Warfield's works or something. That would have been good.
I know.
Uh, you could expand your library on this. Awesome. That's so helpful. Thanks, Todd. And just you're on Twitter, I know. Is that at Todd Bordow? Is that the handle there?
Yeah.
Okay. And
I'm on, but I don't really use Twitter, but it's
right,
there.
yeah, I'm the same. Sort of just kind of there, and that's it. And then in terms of if people want to follow your sermons and that sort of thing, is there a website for Cornerstone?
You can go to Sermon Audio and just put my name in,
Okay, great.
and all my sermons are on there.
Awesome. I know a lot of people are going to want to do that. And then in terms of we've already talked about your blog and then Glory Club. So anything else we could mention there to help people follow you?
That would be it.
All righty. Well, hey, I appreciate your time, Todd. Really, I realize, got a lot of stuff going on, and it's just, it's so helpful to us to hear from you. And I hope everyone listening to this has appreciated that. So looking forward to, thanks a million for starting off on these new series, and I'm looking forward for this Bible overview thing as well. My goodness, that's crazy exciting. So if anyone doesn't know about that, they've just started a Bible overview series. I'm preaching a Bible overview series right now. Whew, that is a big job right there. And so I'm regretting it. I wish I had started after you guys had started. That way I could just copy you. That would have been good. But now, here I am way ahead. So I'm just going to have to see all the things I did wrong. Basically, that's what this is going to come down to. I have to just go through your notes and go, I'm going to have to preach it again later.
Thanks to all your listeners for listening to Glory Cloud. Also, we appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's such a valuable podcast. So let me encourage you guys to keep moving there. All right, well, we'll wrap it up at that point. Thanks so much again, Todd, and thanks for listening, guys. And I'm ending it. Yeah, you should hear the jingle.